back to Robin's Nest, episode 5. I want to thank everyone again for all of your support. I really appreciate it. My name is Robin Kevlis-Nekowitz, and I am a psychotherapist for the last 30 years, and I have been married for 23 years this Friday, I think it is. And I am really passionate about parenting and politics and marriage and friendship, spirituality and food, and that is what my podcast will be about. I have a book called Go Take a Bath, A Powerful Self-Care Approach to Extraordinary Parenting, available on Amazon. And you can watch these podcasts several places. You can watch it on YouTube by searching for Robin's Nest Podcast on YouTube. And then on all of the platforms that have podcasts, you can just search Robin's Nest. And on Instagram, please follow me there at Robins_Nest_pod to keep up with all of the episodes as they are posted. And now that we got all of that out of the way, I would like to introduce my guest for this week, who is Bonnie Koss. Bonnie is a therapist and a mom and a social justice warrior, as far as I'm concerned, and a mom of 4 kids. 4, you heard that correctly, 4 kids. And we met at Liberté, which is a facility that both of us work. What year was it? Do you remember?
I absolutely do, because when you said it was your wedding anniversary, we were both married in 1997, which is the same year that I started, and you got married soon after I started.
Really? Okay, so it was 1997. Okay. So how many years ago was that?
So you're married how many years?
Okay, 23 years. So, yes, so we met 23 years ago at Liberté. We were both middle managers, along with a third friend named Maureen McCormick, who is probably not even listening to these podcasts, let's be honest. This is not her thing. But so the 3 of us were middle managers together at a place called Liberté, which is a drug and alcohol rehab. Well, it's not a rehab. It was a, what do you call it?
It
wasn't a rehab. It was a halfway house.
Halfway house, right.
It was a halfway house.
I was brought on to the family house, yeah.
Correct. And at that time, they were starting the family house, which was a place for women to come with their children while the women were recovering from drug and alcohol abuse. And Bonnie was brought on to head up that whole program. So welcome, Bonnie. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I've enjoyed all of your podcasts up till now. So this is exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to publicly thank you, because you actually did one of the nicest things anyone has ever done for me in my life, which is that when my book came out, you offered to host I don't know what you would even call it. Like, it's a book signing, but I came and I did a small presentation for your friends,
right?
But you fed everybody. You had this big spread for everyone. And it was just the most generous thing that anyone has ever done for me, especially as it relates to the book or anything like that. And I so appreciated that. I think of that all the time and just how generous it was. And I want to thank you for that publicly.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm a big fan of the book. I, to this day, still recommend it in my practice all the time. I have absolutely integrated it into my own life. So, I do. I mean, I was happy to support it, and I love, just supporting friends anyway. So it was an easy thing.
Well, I appreciate it so much. And then we must tell everybody about the latest incarnation of our friendship. So why don't you tell that version of the story?
Well, what's funny about that story for me is that, we've known each other since before kids. We got married at the same time. We actually had our oldest almost identically at the same time. And when we would get together over the years, you and I, would share mom stories and just the highs and lows. And being therapists, of course, we, overanalyze. And we both, would talk about our different kids and the lessons that we were learning. Mm-hmm. And for both of us, there were particular kids that, really were stretching us to grow. And so as it turns out, the one that stretches me and the one that you would share that would also stretch you, turns out both ended up at the same university, Temple University here in Philadelphia, and they had actually met.
Wait, they ended up in the same building.
Right. They met. Well, first they met on their own through social media, and then they ended up in the same building, and now
on the same floor.
Right. And now they're roommates.
And now they're roommates. And this is completely separate from our friendship. Completely.
Absolutely.
In fact, I think I told you that Zoe sent me a text that said, "Do you know what Bonnie Koss?" Did I tell you that? And I was like staring at the screen, like, first of all, how does she not know that I know Bonnie Koss?
Right.
And second, why is she asking me this? And then my mind is going, and then I'm like, oh, well, Talia's at Temple. So I bet you they met somehow.
Right.
And they totally hit it off, because what I think is so interesting about their friendship, and I'm sure they're listening, so shout out to Zoe and Natalia.
Absolutely.
But what I think is so interesting about the two of them, and that they stretched us, but they stretched us in very different ways. With very, very different personalities. So they're like yin and yang for each other. You know, even though they were kind of yin and yang and yang.
Well, I actually think because that's why you and I are friends, because, you know,
because we're different.
Right. Natalia is very much like me in a lot of ways.
And Zoe is exactly like me.
Right. And so some of what she struggled with and struggles with, you know, absolutely, over the years have forced me to really take a hard look at myself. And
same.
Yeah.
Absolutely same. For sure. I mean, Zoe has been my greatest teacher in life, without a doubt. And I'm so grateful to her for that.
Right. Absolutely. And also there's something beautiful about that, because Natalia and I now, much more so, you know, we can share a look and we already know what each other's thinking.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things Zoe said to me recently that really warmed my heart is that she knows that she can come to me with some kind of hard situation with friendship or in a relationship or just a life issue. She says, because I'm almost guaranteed to know that you've had this exact experience before, because she thinks about things in such a similar way, in that way. And struggles in relationships in the same kinds of ways that I've struggled in relationships.
Absolutely.
So I get it. So having listened to the previous podcast, did you have any thoughts about specifically the parenting parts of things with the girls or with Lori? Any thoughts about it?
Well, first of all, I think in the first one, when you were talking to Arlie, you had mentioned, you know, that you, before being a parent, you know, may have professed a whole bunch of stuff, and that you've lived to eat every word. And I share that all the time in my practice and just with friends, especially where I was at Liberté, and I was brought on to head this family house. And one of my major jobs was to teach parenting, because I also have a degree in education, and, you know, had been an elementary school educator for a little while. And I've eaten every word that I sat up there and said. And I think it's because, and you said it very succinctly, that, you know, before I really thought it was all about nurture, nurture, nurture. Yeah. And it is 100% nature, to the point that almost I now realize even how each child came into the world, their birth story is exactly.
It's so true. Oh my God, it is so true. Like Arlie, I think we were talking about this even on that first podcast. Arlie did not want to come out. Right. Arlie really, really likes wherever she is. So she doesn't want to move. So we had to go in and get her. She was 2 weeks late, and we had to go in by C-section because she would not move. And she is exactly the same today. And with Zoe, she was so active in utero. She's so active that it was freaking me out, because Arlie was the opposite. So she was had so much energy, constant energy, always keeping me up all night long. Yep. And then even after she was born, I finally got a shower. I will never forget this. I finally had a shower at the hospital. I finally felt well enough to get up. And as I'm in the shower, knock, 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 knock on the bathroom door, like this very angry knock. And I'm like, yeah, what do you need? I'm screaming from the shower, and it's the nurses from the nursery with Zoe saying, your child won't stop screaming. I'm going to leave her in the bathroom for you. And so now I'm taking this shower, my very first shower, and she's screaming bloody murder in the bathroom. So, of course, I have to quickly get out of the shower and tend to her think it's 98. I think it's 98% nature. And then we do have a little bit with the nurture piece that we can shape what nature brought to us.
I think we can soften it, is what I say in my practice.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I mean, you know, I had the 4 kids in 5 years, so it wasn't like that's when my parenting really changed. And yet their reactions, of course, and how they heard whatever they heard, you know, is exactly who they were. You know? But
that's so true. That's so true. Right. That's so true. That they're going to hear them through the funnel of their nature. Right? They're going to hear. I always give the example that if Arlie was, and this is a silly example, and Zoe has never heard this, and this never happened. I just use this as a way to express this point, which is that, like, if Arlie was going toward an outlet, and I just would give her a look, like, Arlie, don't go near that outlet. She'd be crying, oh, I'm sorry. And with Zoe, she would be going to the outlet. I'd be saying, Zoe, don't touch the outlet. Zoe, don't touch the outlet. Zoe, don't touch the outlet. Then she would touch the outlet. She would get electrocuted. God forbid. Of course, this is all made up. This never happened. And then she would blame me because I didn't stop her. And I was screaming, but she wasn't registering it. So it's the same story, 2 different kids. And you're absolutely right. They hear it through whatever filter they're born with. You're absolutely correct.
And to that point, with your point about nature versus nurture. So like for my oldest, you know, she does not get sarcasm. She never has. And of course she was
Which one? Which kid? Okay.
Celia, my oldest.
That's number 1.
Yes. And because, you know, of course, as life would have it, her dad is incredibly sarcastic. And so when she hit her tween years, you know, this was like, you know, the tension between the 2 of them. And to the point that we finally like figured it out. And we really like taught her like how to say, Dad, you know, the way you're looking at me, I think that you're angry. And he would look at her and he'd be like, no, I'm not angry at you. But again, giving her the tools to like, because she had a whole story in her head, which that is her nature, to create a whole story and go off on it. And so that the tools then become, you know, check your reality often.
Right. But I think that's true about all of us too, regardless of what, you know, we all have our own story about what's being said to us, and it's very rarely what's actually being asked of us or said to us. We have to check it out. So you're really almost done parenting. You are down to your last child at home, correct?
I am. I have a good friend who also has 4 kids and who are a bit ahead of mine. And I remember when her last one was home, and she would kiddingly say, you know, I really work at staying awake because, you know, you get to the last one, you think, okay, like we're almost there. And you start thinking, oh, maybe we'll take some weekends away. Maybe we'll do this. And then you have to say, okay, no, it's not, you know, we're still parenting here because he's 16. He just turned 16. So we're still in the thick of it, a 16-year-old, starting to drive and all that stuff. So yes. And he is not happy actually to be an only. You know, some people, I think other kids maybe, but his personality is such that, he actually started mourning before they left the house. He was like, please don't leave me.
Wow. Wow. How do you feel about this part of your life being in the past soon? Being in the trenches of parenting. Of course, we never stop parenting. Right. But you know, that was an intense time. I mean, 4 kids in 5 years over the last 21 years, being a parent, you know, now you're getting to the end. How do you feel? Are you feeling like I'm ready, or are you like, wow, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like not being a parent on the day-to-day, dealing with all the day-to-day struggles of parenting? So I think people have very different reactions to this.
Yeah, I think if you had asked me this question a couple years ago, I would have told you, you know, I would have started to cry and I would have said, I'm not ready. And I was really having trouble shifting from, you know, looking back and sort of, you know, all those beautiful memories or missed opportunities or whatever it is that we do. But I have to say, in the last 6 months or a year, you know, I am ready. You know, I realize that, you know, my mother says the universe knows when to dry up the ovaries.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
yeah, you get
Wow. That's really true. In the episode that you have not heard yet, because it has not been aired, I was talking to my friend Lori last week about exactly that, but in a different way. I was saying that one of the best pieces of parenting advice that I ever got was that at every stage of your child's life, you're ready for it. And I couldn't imagine that when my kids were young. And the example I was giving was that I couldn't imagine putting my children behind the wheel of a car, which I consider like a death machine, and just saying, text me when you get there. I mean, like, it just seemed so outrageous to me that I would ever be comfortable with that. And this person had said to me, by the time they're ready to drive, you are so sick of driving, right? Or by the time they're ready to leave for college, you were like, bye bye. Like, I need a nap, like, for sure. And it was really the truth. And it goes back to what you're just saying, like, God knew the right time to dry up women's ovaries. Like, it's just like that time in my life was so precious to me.
Right.
There is nothing more important to me in my whole life than the job that I've done as a parent. But I'm also ready to parent them in a whole new way, from a distance, where you call me every once in a while and ask me my opinion, or not, and just tell me about your day.
Right. And also, I mean, I've seen, I come from, I have 3 older brothers, and they've done it differently, right? I have some that chose to be parents a little bit later in life. And so I've seen it both ways. And in some ways, I was fairly, now in retrospect, of course, at the time, I didn't think I was young, too young. But, there were things that I put off in having this family because it was so important to me and I wanted to be so present. And so now I do have like a little bit more of an itch to, to just be fancy free and take those weekends or those larger trips if we ever get out of COVID. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just nice to have something to look forward to, for sure. Do you think that being a therapist helped or hurt your whole parenting journey?
Yeah, I think that being a parent helped my therapy practice.
For
I
sure.
don't know.
That's a definite.
Right.
That's a definite.
Right. I don't know if it works the other way. Only because, I think for me, I came to being a therapist, quote unquote, almost like naturally, because it's just, you don't know what you don't know. So, for instance, I didn't realize how intuitive I am and how emotionally based I am because I just assumed everybody was this way. Mm-hmm. But obviously, the sort of greatest honor of being a therapist is you get to really
bear witness. Yeah.
To hear how other people think and the things that they struggle with. And you realize that not everybody really can see. Mm-hmm. So, and then becoming a parent and being in the same relationship for 28 years. These are the things that have only made me more of a better therapist.
Right,
so it's almost the opposite for me. It's that answer.
Right. Well, yes, it answers part of it. But do you think that, I'm just curious, like, do you think that by being a therapist and seeing different ways that people parent or different ways that people move through the world or think about things, do you think that that influenced you as a parent? And that's a hard question. I don't even know how I would answer it.
Well, that's a little bit different of a question. I mean, because that I don't even.
That was the question, Donna.
I know, but that I don't even know how I'm hearing it, right? Because we hear different people hear it how we want.
That's the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other question. But the actual question was,
I know,
whether or not you think being a therapist has influenced your parenting.
I mean, yes, because I don't think, because it would be, because I can't take. It's all I know. And being privy to other people's stories, other people's struggles has absolutely maybe normalized some of what then I saw in my own kids and also to understand trauma and also have more grace for myself as well as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Grace for ourselves is key. So, as a parent and a therapist, what do you think the biggest parenting misconceptions are out there?
Oh, well, this speaks straight to your book. Like I said, I've really integrated your book into my practice and into my life. You talk a lot about, self first, couplehood second, and children third. Now, I should also say, I am absolutely paraphrasing. This is how I have then come to interpret it.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
And it is, yeah, and I have absolutely seen how the rising rates of anxiety and depression and suicidology have rise in our children and just in general in our culture. And I believe that is mostly because we put our children in the wrong place in that order.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, and I think when you say, self first, couplehood second, children third, and when I share that with people, they're surprised.
I know.
And
that's why we're in the state of the world that we are.
Right. And we all have heard sort of that, analogy of putting the mask on self first in the airplane. But but people really haven't understood how much culturally, there's these expectations for women to not do that, and how much shaming there is, right? And what we tell ourselves why we can't do that. And yet we do know that if we are not in a place of balance, then we can't be there for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I find so, I don't know whether the word is upsetting or disturbing or backwards, I don't know, is that, and this speaks to the same point about self-care, is that people are trying to heal their families by healing the identified patient of the family, which is somehow the child. When the child is really just manifesting the dynamics that are going on in the family. And if you really want to heal your child, heal yourself. And my personal favorite line in the book, and I'm totally putting you on the spot, and it's totally fine if you don't remember this, but do you remember what the last line of the book is? It's my favorite line in the book, and that's okay. I put it at the very last line of the book because this is what I wanted people to be left with. It has its own line and its own paragraph, and it says, "World peace is achieved one healed parent at a time." World peace is achieved one healed parent at a time. I believe that with every cell in my body.
So to that point, right? So this is the work that I do a lot for myself and in my practice. And again, it comes from my own experience of being a mother. So, and it ties into all of this, which is, again, the work is about figuring out who we are, because again, nature, and then accepting it and removing the shame and guilt
about who we are,
right?
And also who our child is,
and who we aren't, right? Because we have the fantasy of, like, I had this fantasy of who I was going to be as a mother, and then as it turned out, that's not the mother I am at all. And that I really had to come to terms with that as number one. And then the other piece is that the only tools we have for any of these roles, mothering, being a wife, being a friend, is really, it's not what we're saying to our kids, it's how we're actually living. And I say that because I know what I was modeled, and I know in my adolescence slamming the door and saying, I will never do X, Y, and Z. And yet in my parenting, even knowing I didn't want to be saying X, Y, and Z, knowing how harmful it was to me, in an unconscious moment when I was triggered, it's coming out of my mouth. And then having to really say, wait a minute, like, these are the only tools I have. So, like, I better stop
Mhm.
and do some work. And to that
Right.
point, I'm undernourished, so I'm already being triggered. I'm,
Mhm.
going unconscious. I'm out of balance, not putting self first. So
Right.
again, this is where I put all those kinds of pieces together that
Yeah.
I really appreciate in the book.
Thank you. I really, yeah, this goes back to role model the life you wish for your
Yep,
child instead of
absolutely.
instead of just telling them the kind of life you want them to have, show them the life that you want to have by living it and role modeling it for them. And also what you were just talking about having those moments where you are your mother or you're saying the things that you didn't necessarily want to say and having a lot of forgiveness for yourself because we are human beings
Right.
and we're fallible and we are going to make 1,000 parenting mistakes along the way. And I think
Absolutely.
that our children are very forgiving of those things as long as we take ownership
Yep.
of, yeah, I wish I hadn't have said that. I wish that I didn't handle it that way. I even talked in that first episode, with Arlie. She has talked about a specific thing that I had done in terms of setting limits with her that really wasn't necessary. And it was actually in some ways piling on to her already internalized structure. And now I was adding to it when
Right.
really, if I was more attuned, I would have been loosening it instead of adding onto it and being able to hear that and say, yeah, I can see that. And I apologize.
Right.
All right. So switching gears a little bit from parenting to COVID. I am very curious to know first, very briefly, just how you're handling COVID at work, but I'm much more interested in how you're handling COVID in your personal life.
Well, COVID, when it first, back in March,
Hmm.
um, I think when it first hit, I was, being a therapist, I'm analyzing at all times.
Right.
And I really, um, it, for myself and for those around me, it kind of was like this extra gift in some
Hmm.
way. Like it just felt like, okay, we are going to hunker down. We have no problem. We believe in science. We believe that this was a real issue. Um, my husband actually had some inside information what was coming out of China. And so we understood how important
Hmm.
this was. And so we just hunkered down. And to that point, it was like almost a gift to be able to realize that I am at the end of parenting and
I
all of
just
us.
want to mention, I'm sorry to the listeners, that your husband is a physician
Yes,
who specializes in Eastern medicine, right?
yes, he does
Right.
acupuncture
So
and
that's
herbs
what you
and
mean when
China.
you say like that he had a connection to China.
Right.
He's very
He was,
connected to that culture.
and
Okay,
he had
go
actually
ahead.
just been in China in September.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, so so it was knowing that I was towards the end of my parenting, like we said, it was sort of this gift that all of a sudden, we were my second was in his first year of college in Boston. We rushed, we picked him up, we got him home. My senior in high school, and then I had a freshman in high school. Their school was immediately shut down, and unfortunately, my daughter was in South Africa in a year abroad, so that was a whole
Mm.
nother issue. But I was, I'd gone, did a huge grocery shopping right before they closed everything.
Right.
And I actually reached out to all my patients and I said, I'm happy if you feel like we need to meet virtually. I don't normally do this, but given the circumstances, I'm happy to do it. And actually everyone pretty much said, no, I think I'm good. And through one of those interchanges with one of my patients, we actually realized that all of us were feeling this lack of FOMO, fear of missing out. It was like everything was stopping. So it actually, for the first time in a long time, you know, everybody was home, right? You
Right.
didn't feel like you had to be out or going somewhere or turning down an invitation.
Right.
And it was really nourishing. I was
Yeah.
baking and organizing and doing all that everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, after about 2 weeks, we started to be like, okay, but we're not
What's
hearing
next?
news. And then I started emailing patients again and saying, just checking in, know that I'm out here. And eventually, around week 3, I did get some inquiries with patients I was already seeing and engaged with, and I started, seeing them virtually. And then, I could watch the anxiety start to ramp up.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of old tapes that we had worked on
Yeah.
in therapy, when I say old tapes, things that we tell ourselves, the stories that we go into kind of,
Yeah.
were starting to be triggered. And also, a lot of us have social anxiety. And so, again, we build tools to be able to go into the world and interact and live. And what we don't use, we lose.
Right.
And so I was seeing that too, where people were getting more and more heightened in the, what if, what if when I do go to the store? And, now we live in a world where it's so easy to get everything sent to the house that they had figured out how to basically live their lives
by themselves in their
by
house.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And even the most introverted of people still needs, human connection.
Absolutely.
And so this is where, I had a couple of patients who really had a crisis.
Yeah.
And
how are you doing with it?
So,
personally?
Me personally, like I said, I organized. I did all of the things that I love to do. And I was doing pretty well. I think it hit me more when I started to see my freshman in college at the time, him start to go down the tube. And that, I think, was really hard for me. And then we got my daughter home from South Africa, which was a whole ordeal. So we had a few crises that kept us sort of propelled. Yeah, in the beginning. So for me, it was a little bit longer into the process.
Okay.
I think for me, it was more like I just kept thinking by summer we'll be good. And we were holding on to a trip in August, and when June came, I was like, God, this is not good. By July 4th, we'll be good. Like, I'm going to start looking at the beach, maybe going to a hotel or something.
Right.
And we actually scheduled a couple things and then canceled them because, it just, the news wasn't good. And again, we believe in science. And so, yeah, it was. And then I was like, oh no, I'm not loving this either. Like,
right. So is that where you're at now?
Yes. It's been a little bit easier, I think, when we went to Green and we could at least go out to dinner outside. My husband's always been a big hiker, so we were hiking a little bit, and so that's always helpful when you're out in nature. But it's been hard. It's been hard, and I was just talking about this with my kids, if I told them a year ago at this time, you're going to go to the store and you're going to wear a mask, you'd say, "Oh, Mom, you're crazy. Like that's not going to happen." And I would have said that, not here. And now, I do have that moment now every single time before I step out of my car when I'm going to go to run an errand. It's just like, wow, this is a different world.
Yeah. How are you feeling when you see people not wearing masks?
Yeah. Well, that just brings up a whole, other can of worms, which I know you'll probably go into with me on here. But
this might be a great segue to that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So you introduced me as a social justice warrior. I never would have thought this is where I would land, although I've always had a guttural reaction to inequity and injustice, just even as a little kid, and just violence in general. And like guttural, like I just can't, like I get nauseous. And so, just this whole divide that goes on in our culture at this point. So like wearing a mask and not wearing a mask, right? It really breaks my heart that we can't have conversations, that there's so much that we just project onto each other, um, and that there's just not a decency and a mutual respect, that even if you don't, agree, but if somebody else is terrified or so forth, that's enough. That's enough of a reason to put on a mask.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're actually down to our last 15 minutes. So I'm going to skip around here and move into the Trump years and ask you how you have been managing, and how have any of your relationships been affected because of politics? I'm very curious about that. And just what you're most afraid of moving forward, and how you've been managing these last 4 years.
So before the Trump years, I had already sort of started to really wake up to the racial inequity that exists. We live outside of Philadelphia. We are in a suburb. I had the opportunity to be dropping off some donations in the Philadelphia schools after being an Uber, an avid volunteer in my kids' suburban schools. And when I dropped off those donations in the city, I knew that the schools in the city weren't great, but I had no idea the conditions of them. And so that goes back over 10 years now. And in seeing it, I couldn't unsee it. And it led me sort of on this road to me to understand what I was looking at, and to understand and really pay attention much more so to the fact that I live in a primarily white area. I live on the main line, quote unquote, of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And the schools that I now, volunteer in and partner with are primarily Black and Latinx. And so that just led me into starting to really look at race in this country and the historical stuff that I didn't understand. So then when we fast forward to 2016, I was not one of those people that was shocked.
Okay.
I was not. Okay. I live in a very conservative enclave, and I had seen all the Trump support. Okay. So I knew that it was a close race. I also knew that how many people were, quote unquote, turned off by Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And
were you turned off by Hillary Clinton?
I was not turned off by her, and I absolutely supported her at the end of the day. She was not my first candidate, I will say that. I've always been a Bernie supporter.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I forgot. Oh my God. You're a Bernie sis, I guess. You're not a bro.
Right. But Senator Clinton did get my vote because, at the end of the day, I wasn't going to waste a vote, and I knew it was going to be close. But I had heard, I can't stand her voice, all sorts of sexist things. And I had actually said to my husband before that, that I believe that the country wasn't ready for a woman, and that the country would, elect a Black man before a woman.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%. There's so much sexism. I have heard things from women.
Oh, absolutely.
Who I consider liberal, feminist, but even they will say, there was something about her I just didn't like. What do you think that what is that? Could you? I'm very curious. What is it? Give me a specific that you didn't like. I don't know. Something just about her. Something about her. I hear it all the time, and people don't realize that is their internalized sexism, that they cannot stand strong feminine voices.
Absolutely.
And they will not admit it because they're not conscious of it. So it's not that they're not admitting it because they're trying to just hide from it. They're not conscious of it themselves. Absolutely. It's so internalized. So
no, and I've struggled that, and as a woman myself, I've struggled with that because I grew up. Like I said, I have 3 older brothers. My house growing up was fairly, very conservative, 1950s style. So I have had to confront a lot of my own sexism. And also in just raising, because of my 4 kids, I do have 2 girls and 2 boys, and I've had to be really conscious for both of them, for both sexes.
Yeah. Even my husband, when he was listening to my podcast with Lori, the one that you heard, the first one, he said, I don't know. I said, were you cringing at all, like during when I was talking about Trump? Like, did I go too far? Did I go off the rails? He said, no, not at all. I didn't feel anything then. Now, my husband is the most feminist-oriented man I personally know, for sure. I mean, for real. Yeah. But then he said, the only cringe moment that I had was when you and Lori were bragging about being at the top of your class in graduate school. That's what he said. And I said, well, don't we just need to check our sexism at the door? No, I would have had the same reaction if it was a man. He's not, it's so ingrained. Right. And so he was telling that to me in case I wanted to edit it out. I said, oh no, I won't be editing it out. And when I told Lori about it, she was cracking up too. Like, she didn't have a reaction of, oh, maybe we shouldn't have said that. Because we're strong women who stand in our power. But
on your space.
But it's not easy. It's not easy because even someone as evolved as my husband is, and he really truly is, it's not even a conscious thought. And when I pointed out to him that was his internalized sexism, he flatly denied it. He just said, no, I don't think it was coming from that place at all. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I've learned, again, when I look at race, it's in the air we breathe. So
it really is.
It doesn't matter if you're, white or black, if you're a woman or a male, people of color will talk about their own internal racism,
Yes. The only thing, as I've said many times so far on this podcast, that I had like a mental breakdown after the 2016 election. For real. I mean, it was literally like my worst nightmare come true. And, having 2 daughters, I mean, we just sobbed and sobbed. I could cry again. I mean, it's so present for me, especially as we're about to enter, this next election. But the only thing that gave me any calm, I don't know if you remember this, but it was a Saturday Night Live skit that was presented the week after the election. And it was a bunch of white women and people. It wasn't just women. It definitely look this up, people, if you have not seen it. It was a Saturday Night Live skit where there were women and men that were watching the results of the election. And as each state went to Trump, do you remember this? As each state went to Trump, they were like, oh my God, well, it's okay, because we definitely have Wisconsin. We totally have Wisconsin. Okay, he lost Wisconsin. Well, that's where the racists live. And then there was the black people at the party going, is that where the racist people live? So funny, right? And then when and throughout the whole night, and as each state went to Trump, and the white people are more and more shocked, which I am identifying with because this was my exact experience on election night. But then Chris Rock comes in along with the other, what is his name? Do you remember? The other black comedian on SNL, really funny. I can't think of his name, but they start having a conversation.
Rock, right? He's the guy from 30. Is he from the guy from 30 Rock?
I think so. I think so. And they start having a conversation about that these people are shocked that Trump, and all the white people are staring at the screen like
I absolutely remember
all the blood, right, dripping from their face, and the 2 black men are like, "You want to go get something to eat?"
And this
stage in their life whatsoever.
And this is probably why, because like I said, I've been doing the racism town halls, the courageous conversations, for over 10 years. So these are the people, I was already hanging out with people. And so I already had a good sense of like, oh yeah, people, you don't know you have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah. And it was a huge wake-up call.
And
I would like for you
since.
And what?
And everything we've seen since. I mean, it just has played out. And it's proven to be.
I never had a doubt. This is why I was so hysterical. Like, I knew who he was, and I knew how it would play out, and everything happened exactly as I thought.
And it's just
I want to give you an opportunity to plug your fundraising and all that kind of stuff. Is there a website that people can go to?
So I started this nonprofit after seeing the inequity, and it's called Social Fundraising and Gatherings.org is our website. We also have
is it fundraising or is it fund?
Well, it's fundraising, but the FUN can be capitalized.
Oh, okay. And sticks out my head.
Yes, and we also have a Facebook group, same thing, same name, Social Fundraising and Gatherings, and we're all 100% volunteer. Nobody takes a salary, myself included. This is really the work that fed my soul. When we say take care of self first, this is what I found really brought me energy and got me through those middle years of parenting, the tweens to the adolescents. This is where I put my energy and focus and just growth. And
can you say a little bit about exactly what this group does?
So we do everything right now we are partnered with some public schools in Philadelphia, 2 in Strawberry Mansion in North Philly and 1 in Kensington. And we basically act like a virtual PTO. We try and engage the community as well to work with us, but we do everything from teacher luncheons, we'll refurbish classrooms. We have at times run food pantries and clothing closets. But we also, because as volunteers, we're primarily, in the beginning, we're mostly white women rolling up to these schools, and that's what forced me to have to look at the race issue. And so out of that, I also started doing this educational component where we now hold races in town halls and have courageous conversations, because I really think it's a balancing act between education and then service, right? Because if we do service without understanding, we can do more harm than good. And if we just, sit in the classroom, it can get very frustrating too. And so it's about this balance between the two.
Do you follow Glennon Doyle at all?
Of course I do.
Okay. So she talks a lot. I went to see her, live, and one of the stories that she tells that really I hold that really speaks to what you're talking about is that we can't just be pulling people out of the river. We have to also be looking upriver to see who's pushing them in.
Right.
And we have to address who's pushing them in, not just keep pulling them out.
Right.
So you're talking about both, the duality of both. Right. And how can people get involved with these town halls? Is there a place?
So again, if you go to either the website but even better, because in real time, right, I do a lot of Facebooking. So going to the Facebook group, Social Fundraising and Gatherings, we post whenever we're having one, and we try and have them at different locations at different times of day to try and work around people's schedules. Now, of course, with COVID, it's been harder. We're actually talking about doing maybe something virtual. So stay tuned for that as well.
Excellent. We are so very close to being out of time, but I just want to know, what is your prediction for the 2020 election, which is in 3 short weeks?
Yes. Look, I think it is going to be close.
Do you really?
I do.
Really?
Again, there's a lot. We still live in our same conservative enclave, and the same people still have their signs gigantic up. But I do now see more Biden. And I do think this time, and I'm putting this out there in the universe, I do think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will win, and I am excited for especially Kamala Harris to have a voice in this. So, yeah.
Okay. But do you think he's going to leave? If I could play Bill Maher for a moment.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm with Bill Maher on that. I think that we better have all our ducks in a row. And I do believe there are people behind the scenes, hopefully.
Preparing for that. Right?
Preparing for that, yes.
And having a plan.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they're not telling Bill Maher, but yes.
Which they would, because...
Yes, everybody.
Get out of me. Did you watch it last week?
I watch it every week, and
did you watch it this last week?
Yes.
The very end where he lays out what could happen. It was the most frightening thing ever. Yeah. It was terrifying, especially with what's happening with the Supreme Court as we are recording this. It's frightening. Okay, last question, and I really am going to go after this.
Oh.
I am very curious to know, if you're willing to share, what your feelings are about, if Amy gets through on the Supreme Court, which she will, what are your feelings about stacking the court once a Democrat takes over? I'm trying not to give my bias, even though anyone that listened to me last week, but Bonnie didn't hear last week because it's not up yet as of this recording. But I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
Look, I'm not opposed to it. I think it's because, first of all, full disclosure, one of my internships in social work school was working for Pennsylvanians for Choice. So I am absolutely a big believer in a women's right to choose. So for that reason alone, this terrifies me.
Yeah, terrifying.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm a Bernie fan, so I think it should be a national health care system. So the fact that they're trying to, overturn
I agree.
a little bit that we have. So yeah, I mean, if that's what it takes, only because again, and this is this is where it gets tricky, right? Because part of what's happened in our culture is I feel like we've lost our soul, we've lost our integrity, but because they haven't been playing by the rules to begin with, right? Where Obama should have had the option to appoint his nominee, and it was blocked.
Yeah.
And why should we then play by this antiquated rules?
We can't. Otherwise, we're just laying there while they run their trucks over.
But I will say
that's what it feels like.
Right. And the only thing I'll say about that is that's why now I spend so much time focused on educational inequity, because I do feel that so much of where we're at as a culture is because of what we've done to our educational system, and that people do not know how to think anymore. People do not know how to reason. They don't know how to have a civil discussion. And I really think this goes down to because of our educational system. So given all of that, yes, we have to stack it until we can.
I agree. I said it last week. You just didn't hear it yet. But I said it last week. Absolutely, we have to. Anyway, we absolutely have to end. I hate to have it end because I love talking to you. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
I love this idea. I wish you so much luck with it, and I will continue to listen because it's just fun. And I think it's also, again, I think there's nothing better than girlfriends, and I'm sure you're going to have some males on too, but to listen to women talk and mothers and daughters, I just think we go off in a million different directions, and all of it is nourishing, and it's our humanity. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much again for being here. And everyone, please follow me at Robins_Nest_pod on Instagram, or please subscribe to the podcast. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much again. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.